Sarah Ferguson is writing a $14 million tell-all memoir that could destroy the royal family. She claims she warned the palace about Prince Andrew and Epstein years ago, but they ignored her. Now she wants revenge. The book promises to expose private conversations, palace cover-ups, and royal secrets that have been buried for decades. Publishers are comparing it to Prince Harry's explosive memoir. Television networks are offering six-figure deals for interviews. Palace staff are terrified she'll torch the aviary of secrets. After 40 years of silence, Fergie is finally ready to tell everything. Sarah Margaret Ferguson was born on October 15, 1959 at a private hospital in London called Mayfield. Her father, Major Ronald Ivor Ferguson, worked with the British Army and later became the man who managed the royal family's polo ponies. Her mother, Susan Mary Wright, came from an old aristocratic line and had grown up as a debutante. So even though Sarah's own home felt more middle class, her family often moved through circles that touched the edges of royalty. She heard stories about old Stuart blood and she saw the Queen's horses up close because her father worked with them. All of this made her childhood feel close to the world of the monarchy even before she was old enough to understand it. But her parents separated in 1974 when she was 13. And that moment quietly shifted everything inside her. She spent her childhood in Hampshire on her grandfather's estate in Dummer. It was a wide, peaceful place filled with countryside stables and open fields. Her father managed the Queen's polo ponies there, so horses were a normal part of daily life. At 4, she was already riding her small pony named Scotty, and the bond she built with horses became her safe place. As she moved into her teens, riding became the one thing that helped her stay steady while her home life began to crack. Her father was always around royal polo events, and Sarah often stood on the sidelines watching matches where princes came and went. That world felt close enough to touch, though she remained on the outside of it. When her parents divorced in 1974, her mother left the UK after falling in love with an Argentine businessman named Hector Barrantes. She moved to Argentina and Sarah stayed in England with her father and his new wife, Susan Deptford. Sarah was 13 and trying to understand why everything had changed. She did stay in contact with her mother, but the distance between them was real. Her father later had 3 more children, and the shape of the family kept shifting around her. She had to adjust fast and become independent earlier than most teenagers. Even though the fractures were painful, they shaped the strength she carried later in life. Her school years were mixed. She went to Neeshill School and then Hurst Lodge School in Berkshire. She was not known for top marks or quiet study. People remembered her more for swimming, tennis, and her love for drama. She was full of energy, sometimes too much for the classroom. Later, she joined a secretarial college in Ascot to prepare herself for work. It was not a glamorous path, but it taught her practical skills she would use in the years ahead. She was slowly moving away from her childhood world and trying to build a life on her own. By 18, she had already stepped into real jobs. She worked at Butterfields and Robinson Travel Agency as a shop assistant and then moved into the role of a receptionist at Capital Radio in London. This one stood out. She booked guests, handled schedules, and found herself answering calls for celebrities like MC Jagger. After that, she worked in public relations at Mayday PR and then moved into an art gallery job. Each place taught her a little more about handling people, reading rooms, and understanding social circles. These early steps turned her into someone who could walk into any space and know how to hold herself. In 1977, at just 18, she tried to start her First business. She co-founded Fergie and Kittu, an import and export company. That brought French crystal and British woolens into the UK market. It sounded good on paper, but within a year it fell apart. She lacked experience and found herself overwhelmed by the demands of the trade. The company closed, but the attempt showed her willingness to take risks early. Even though it failed, the lesson stayed with her. 2 years later, in 1979, she joined British Airways as a junior publicist in the art department. She organized events like fashion shows and charity galas. These events brought high society into view once again, and she found herself meeting influential people who recognized her growing ease with public life. This role also became the bridge that eventually connected her to her future husband. She learned how to plan carefully, present well, and understand the pressure of public attention. By 1980, she shifted again. This time into publishing. She became a press officer at Mills and Boon, a famous romance novel publisher. She promoted their books in places like Australia and New Zealand, and her campaigns boosted sales by 20% in those markets. Her job took her across continents pitching stories and reaching new readers. It was her first real break into publishing. And years later, she would write books of her own with the confidence this job gave her. In 1981, she took a creative leap and wrote her first novel, Aunt Agatha. It was a romantic comedy based on her own upbringing and some of her family's quirks. She sent the manuscript to publishers, but 12 rejected it. After that, she put the book aside. The rejection was disappointing, but she kept writing whenever she could. It showed that even early on she had a creative spark she did not want to ignore. Then in 1982 she became a freelance journalist for Tatler magazine. She wrote about polo matches and elegant society events. Her father's royal connections helped her land interviews with minor royals, and she earned about £200 per article. It was good money for a young writer. This role placed her firmly inside elite circles and helped her build a reputation as someone who understood both society and storytelling. It prepared her for the world she would soon enter. Sarah first met Prince Andrew at a polo match in June 1981. But nothing happened then. The real moment arrived in June 1985 when Princess Diana introduced them again at Royal Ascot. They had known each other as children who crossed paths at the same events, but this time something clicked. Sarah remembered how Andrew made her laugh right away. They shared interests in flying and adventure, and their first date came soon after that meeting. The public noticed the energy between them, and newspapers began to follow their every move. Andrew had just returned from the Falklands War in 1982, and the experience had changed him. When he and Sarah reconnected in 1985, their bond grew stronger through helicopter flights. Sarah wanted to understand his world, so she started flying lessons and earned her private helicopter pilot's license in December 1987 after just 43 hours of training. Andrew had taken 85 hours on military choppers. He told the press he was amazed by her determination. He also gifted her a Fabrier clock engraved with the words, "To Ginger from the Governor General." It was personal and warm and showed how deep their connection had become. On February 23, 1986, Andrew proposed to her at Flores Castle in Scotland. The ring he gave her had a Burmese ruby worth around £25,000, surrounded by 10 diamonds in a flower shape. It was chosen to match her bright red hair. When the news went public, her face filled newspaper covers across Britain. The ring became one of the most talked about royal engagement rings of the decade, and the proposal marked the beginning of her transformation from working woman to royal bride. Before the Wedding, she kept working. In 1986, she wrote an article for Hello magazine about her dress fittings with designer Linda Sierra. She described the embroidery, the beading, and the joy of shaping her wedding gown. It became her last major piece before stepping fully into royal life. The article was widely read and made people feel she was relatable yet glamorous. Her wedding took place on July 23, 1986 at Westminster Abbey. Around 500 million people watched around the world. Her dress weighed 25 pounds and carried nearly 10,000 pearls. The train stretched 17 feet and the letters A and S were hidden inside the silver beadwork. Her father walked her down the long aisle while cameras captured every detail. It felt like a fairy tale broadcast to the entire planet. People loved the idea of an ordinary young woman becoming a duchess in her wedding dress became one of the most iconic royal gowns in history. As Duchess of York, she took on royal duties right away. In her first year, she completed 105 official engagements. Many of them focused on literacy, because she truly cared about. In 1992, she used £1 million from her book royalties to help launch the National Literacy Trust. It was rare for a royal to contribute personal funds at that level. Her donation helped build programs for schools and libraries. And even years later, people still point to that moment as a meaningful act of service. In 1991, she wrote her first children's book, Little Miracles. It sold 100,000 copies in the UK within its first year. The story featured Augustus the Wise, a magical giraffe. She illustrated herself. She visited 50 schools and read to children, making the book feel personal to its readers. The success turned it into a full series. In 1994, she released The Gentleman's Daughter, a romance set in 18th century England, inspired by Lady Anne Hastings, her own ancestress. The book was serialized in Woman's Own magazine before the hardback release, and people followed the weekly installments like a TV show. It added another layer to her growing writing career. Her book Budgie, The Little Helicopter, published in 1987, became the root of a successful children's TV show in 1994. The series had 52 episodes and brought in over £5 million in merchandise sales. Budgie toys and CDs filled shelves, and children across the UK followed the stories every week. In 1989, she launched the Duchess of York story file on BBC Radio 2. Each week, she read bedtime stories to around 2 million listeners. Children across the country waited for her voice each Sunday. It showed how she used her public position to make something warm and meaningful for families. Sarah Ferguson started building her charity world long before scandals chased her name across front pages. It began quietly in 1991 when she created Chances for Children. She wanted to help kids who had nothing. So, she threw herself into it fully. Over the first 4 years, she raised £1.5 million, most of it coming from big charity galas where she even auctioned off pieces of her own jewelry. By 1995, she was already walking through New York orphanages like the Mother Cabrini home, sitting beside children, talking to them, trying to make the place feel less cold. And as her charity grew across countries, she never hid behind a desk. She stood in the rooms herself, hugged families, listened to them, and pulled more donors in one event after another. That hands-on way of working made people trust her. And for a while, she became the face of celebrity charity work in the early 1990s. Around the same time, she took on another responsibility. In 1990, she became patron of the Teenage Cancer Trust. She did not treat it like a distant title. She hosted the Starlight Ball at the Dorchester Hotel in 1993, raising £250,000 in one night. And even during her busiest periods, she still visited cancer patients close to 20 times a year. She knew many of them by name, and they knew her as the Duchess, who actually sat beside their beds. Her events kept pulling in celebrities and cameras, and slowly the trust's name grew stronger. Across the UK, families kept saying she made the rooms feel lighter when she walked in. Under her, the trust became one of the loudest voices for teenagers fighting cancer. Then came her own foundation. In 1993, she launched the Sarah Ferguson Foundation, and suddenly her work stretched across continents. In India, she helped fund clean water projects in Rajasthan, raising £500,000 just through book tours. She worked with UNICEF teams to make sure every pound reached the villages that needed it most. She walked through dusty roads herself, meeting local families and checking if the systems were really working. As the years passed, her foundation expanded to maternal health, schools, and disaster relief in India, South Africa, and the United States. Her style was always the same. Simple, direct, no fancy speeches, just real work and real results, which made her stand out in a world filled with slow, distant charity offices. By 1996, she was also supporting the British Heart Foundation. She auctioned a signed copy of her novel, A Garden in Tuscany, at Christie's for £10,000, then later chaired the Heartbeat Dinner in 1998, where 300 celebrities showed up and poured money into heart research. She kept attending both big events and tiny community ones, making people feel she actually cared. Her presence helped the foundation reach more homes and more families, and her steady support brought heart health into everyday conversation in the UK.